Abhi. Hello, David. How are you guys? How was your week?
Phenomenal. How about you guys?
How come you're not with that jacket thing, David? Mine, for me, it's really huge. Two of me can fit into that jacket you got me. Abhi seems to be wearing it, very happy with it. Is it warm in California? You're in like a t-shirt, man.
Yeah, well, the sun decided to poke out, so it was sunny in California. Unlike
Abhi,
you, East Coast bros.
and Abhi, are you out of the snow? Is it melted out, or what's the deal in Massachusetts? Abhi, David, is he
Um,
there? Can you hear us?
yeah, I can hear you now. No, I
Okay.
was saying all good here. Pretty sunny day, pretty good, pumped up, a lot of energy outside, inside. So
And I
excited.
wanted to tell all the people who are following us and listening to this, both of these guys raise chickens at home with farm fresh eggs coming every single day.
Right.
I went and saw Abhi's chickens, all of the names, Lady Gaga, Nicki Minaj. I met all of those chickens. Awesome. So today's topic is intent data. The reason is because in the last 5 days, we've talked to what, close to about 11, 12 customers, all saying intent is on top of the funding list for 2025. Everybody wants intent data. So let's just start from the top, and then we'll work our way through it. What is intent data? How is it useful? How do people actually use it? Maybe a little bit of background. Maybe David, you can help us also, which is how do they collect the intent data? How do you know if this intent data is good? How can you make it useful within your campaigns? So let's get started first with Abhi. When did this intent data thing start? Is it used mostly for B2B, B2C, everywhere across the board? Let's go through that history first.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I remember 5 years back, I did a webinar with an amazing analyst in Forrester just about talking about intent. And then I remember talking about like how do we define intent? Intent is just a piece of puzzle because people are saying that somebody is selling intent data of what my buyer is looking for, and I'm gonna go and talk to them. Like that's how it used to be sold 10 years back. The real pioneering company in this kind of made it all center stage is actually Bombora, who kind of, and there are many more. The Tech Target, there's like Intensify, there are like a lot of players. Sixth Sense. Now a lot of these third-party tool company talk about and claim, and they have some of them, is a lot of publisher feed. So the way publisher feed work is you have at least a list of publisher site, could be New York Times, CNN, whatever, right? Fox and all that, where at least 10,000 single visitor, like 10,000 unique visitor coming on a website on one day minimum.
Okay, that's the
That's like
daily audience
yeah, that's
users.
a daily visitor coming on certain publisher side because publisher is everyone, right? Our blog is a publisher side. How much in the internet you can track, right? So the industry follow at least minimum I know of like all the visitors, which is coming to those sites which are like 10,000 and above kind of threshold because that also runs in thousands, hundreds of thousands site. So when you come to those sites, you basically consume content and you read certain topic and you read and download a certain topic, and that leads to like if you do the reverse mapping of all that, that leads to like okay, this is David who came to Yahoo whatever, did a bunch of research on the internet about this. So we used to call this, and this is like kind of my framework. I used to call it like VDSC, like visit, download, search, and engage. VDSC. So if you visit a certain set of site or a page or a topic or sort of thing, and then you download a certain kind of a white paper, certain topic, paper, things like that. And then you search a certain set of keywords, and then you engage with a content piece.
David, are you there?
Yeah.
I think you might have to take on a little bit because I think Abhi's internet has been spotty. So let's start from David, your side. I know that you had mentioned, so when we talked about it, there are a lot of content websites that have people coming and visiting, at least 10,000 people coming is a minimum bar. Once they come into that website, then the next question is, what did they do? They may go to a CNET news site and say, hey, I want to know white paper about cybersecurity or something. And so that is one piece of data that gets collected, and then that gets consolidated into Bombora, which is one intent data provider, such as many other demand base, et cetera, and then they give you that intent data. Is that right? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so it's like Abhi was saying, they have this sort of aggregated they'll have like thousands of sites, these publishers that are part of their network, and then they're monitoring sort of what content's being consumed. From there, they sort of tag the content into keywords. So this is sort of the first point of contention, like how you tag and like how much tags overlap. Um, and then they do some matching. So normally it's at the account level, so they'll know, okay, somebody from SS&C like, you know, read this white paper or something like that. Sometimes it gets down to the individual level. That's really fuzzy. Um, so that's primarily what they're aggregating is what's being consumed, and they're tagging what's being consumed, and then they're trying to tie that back to either an account or an individual. So that's kind of the broad scope.
Now, that feed can come to you in multiple ways. That's what some of the big providers provide, right? The expensive platforms. There are platforms that give you at least 150,000 to 250, and sometimes more than that a year just to be able to get that intent data. Um, and then how have we seen marketers use it? I mean, do you want to take a quick cut at how have we seen some of these
Yeah.
marketers use this intent data?
So just to finish just one point back, it is still at a consumer level, right? You have to map it to the company. It's always been on individual level, like individual history and things like that. But it's the whole amount of complexity is so much, and that's why it's not fully accurate and it's not relevant for my business because I'm doing arm waving. Like I just gave you an example, right? Mukund is interested in AI. What does that even mean? And if I'm a data management company, what does that even mean to you? Like everyone's interested in AI, dude. Like
Yeah.
we used to sell CDP back in the days. Like everyone is interested in CDP, from students to housewife. Just I'm just kind of exaggerating, but like literally, like my mom was interested, like, well, what do my son do actually? So everyone's interested in CDP. How would you establish that this is like a legit interest in a topic, right? So there's that piece. So people came up. So that was the one problem of like boil the ocean of publisher and then give you topics, right? This is one. So it's a piece of the puzzle. Now here's the other piece of the puzzle. If I map my individual customer webs like my website visit data with this
Yeah.
external signal data, then it gets a little bit better. A little bit better. You can predict better. I know who these people are. And then the third thing, if I can map to my ICP and my target audience, and those people are doing this, then I can kind of correlate that, look, I'm trying to sell into CISOs and security officer, and then they're reading about network security, and then it seems like they're looking at pricing page. So they want to buy something. It's not a theoretical research. So you see every data point adds up to the story. I remember working for a client in enterprise. They had like 30 people to decipher this massive file and make it consumable for day-to-day campaigns. That's how complex it was. Now people have productized it in some form or the other, but it's highly inaccurate. It's very probabilistic in nature, like everything else in data and AI is. But there's ways and means to kind of mitigate the risk, right? So that's number two. Number three is this is the biggest confusion I'm seeing in the market most modern time right now. People are confused between intent and business triggers. So let me say this one more time. intent is what we have talked so far, right? All that holy grail of like my intent. And
Yeah,
then
yeah,
there is an aspect called business triggers. Business triggers are news which meaningfully lead into my, you know, like based on my business. So I'll give you an example. There is a hypothesis that every time there's a new CMO hired in the last 90 days is good for iCustomer, because then I go reach out to those guys. They're new, they want to build a new GTM playbook, and this is the right time to talk to them, right? So that's a business trigger. It's not an intent, right? So I
yeah,
can
yeah.
add up the business trigger with this whole holy grail of intent, all together. So I think these kind of waterfall approach is what people are trying to do. And there's a whole bunch of confusion about what is intent, okay, this data, that data. So you need all of this and then customize for your business. And you want to give weightage to each of these business trigger and each of these signals, and then create like your custom intent score primarily. I mean, that's what really it comes down to as a crux. So I'll take a pause. You're on mute, Mukund.
There are business triggers, which could, for example, be new CMO, got funding as an example, or company launched a new product. And then there are intent signals, which is somebody, because it starts with the consumer or the user, are going off and doing some searches. So even if or if not, there was a new CMO, a few people in the company could still be working on a project to search for example, a new CRM solution. That is intent. Now, the CMO comes in, they could or could not prioritize the new CRM project, but the intent already exists. And that would give an indication of budget, for example. If they did a bunch of things on the websites, in the content websites, and then came to your page and then looked at a few different pages, went to pricing, then you know, okay, all right, got it. They're probably having high intent because many people in the company are trying to do the same. David, let's talk a little bit about how do you take this intent data, convert it into actual campaign triggers? Is this a way to be able to take this information, put it into a HubSpot or put it into enrichment platform to get more data about this individual, more data about the company? Or is there a better way to look at this?
So the way I've seen it used sort of historically is like uh they use intent like it's the full meal, so to speak, versus like a piece of the recipe. And like it is super needed because, marketing, sales, any GTM team needs sort of a directional sense on who to target and where to go. So that I think that's why it's so popular. But the way I've seen it used is like, you have to select keywords first. So when you subscribe to an intent vendor, they ask you to select keywords. So this is kind of the first, place where you can go off is kind of like what are the keywords that sort of match like what I'm selling? And then maybe they don't even think a little further. How does that match sort of my current customer base, my future customer base, my ICP, and all of that stuff? And then what they do is they pick these keywords, then they see the whatever keywords are trending based on the group that they picked. Then they'll market to those keywords, and then they'll see more intent within those keywords. So it kind of ends up being this like self-fulfilling circularity, and you end up sort of chasing your own tail. So that's kind of how I've seen it used in the past. Now, how like modern GTM teams are using it, like I harken back to, they'll use it as a piece in the recipe. So sort of like what Avi was saying, you've got to map it to accounts and personas, very specific targeted ICP. You have to map it to other triggers. So I kind of see it as like an alphabet of signals, whatever you want to call them, sort of this group of ingredients for this recipe. And so you've got to also include like who's been hired recently, is there growth? So you have to like triangulate that intent signal with a whole bunch of other signals, and then you'll start to like get a better directional sense. You can either validate or invalidate the intent.
Yeah, I think.
Abhi, sorry, I was going to ask you, Yeah, sorry, you were going to say something about what
No,
David just said.
I was just doubling down on that point that, intent is being overly exaggerated and people should stop chasing intent and they should start chasing ICP, or what is most relevant, a set of accounts relevant to me. And it is not just about who's in the market to buy a certain technology and do sort of arm waving, but who's the right customer? Like who's are the right account? You see the massive problem we've seen in the churn, just because wrong set of accounts. People land and expand, and they kind of trick them. And nowadays growth at all cost has gone, and this is a sustainable growth era, and everyone needs to kind of do it bottom up. So we should like tell this to everyone, like, okay, dude, stop chasing intent, start focusing on ICP. And then if you have a well-defined ICP, which is laser focused, you can do AI lookalike. You can find out what are the technographics and firmographic and what kind of signals. And you kind of create a whole customized weighted approach. Define your SAM. Be more specific to as much as focus you want to do. And then you kill a whole lot of problem. You're like you stop chasing the whole butterflies and this whole lead to account matching and all the bullshit, like, gone, right? You just focus on a very specific TAM. There's only a limited set of companies in the market. There are only relevant companies. And you just continuously monitoring them. When is the right time to engage them? So we don't over hound them. We don't do spray and pray. We just don't do a dance. We don't get backlisted, all of that. I mean, this
Yeah.
is what is, it's high time, guys. Like, buyers are like frustrated, like nothing is working, right? So why to follow what 90% of the folks are doing?
Is it possible to leverage both? Which is, we hearing the story, marketing teams are consistently hear the story that 95% of your customers are not ready to buy. It's only 5%. So let's assume that you have an ICP. Here is the kind of customer, ideal customer profile, the customer we want to go after. Here are the personas within the customer. Then we then overlay the intent data on top of that and focus just on the opportunities that are with intent in our ICP. It's important then what you're saying is to make sure the cart doesn't come in front of the horse. The horse is the ICP. The cart is the intent data. David, am I right? Is this the right way to think about it?
Yeah. And then I think it's also really important, like Avi said, is the monitoring part. And there are some fundamental infrastructure problems to that. No, number one, the intent vendors make it very difficult to keep a time series of the intent signals that are coming. So typically, like when you subscribe to an intent vendor, either you get a flat file, um, but normally you get like a feed. So like some normally one field in your CRM will get this string of keywords, let's say once a week or once a month or whatnot, right? But that field just gets overwritten through time. But if you wanted to, like after a quarter or after 2 quarters, understand what signals contributed to my wins, what signals can I completely ignore, you'll never know because fundamentally this is not time series. It's just something being overwritten over and over and over again. So this is both an issue with the vendors and an issue with these systems of records that people are using.
We talked a little bit about what are the biggest challenges folks are seeing with this intent signal. One we talked about was price. Intent signals from large vendors are very expensive. Number two, the time taken to implement them is quite a bit. Number three, data just pointed out, right? You get a lot of data that just goes into one field, gets overridden. Let's assume that those are technical things that can be solved. What are the other big challenges we see with intent signal vendors?
Yeah. No, that's actually the more important question, that why, even though if you have all this intelligence, why it is still not working? I mean, that's the question I we should look at. And
We have all these signals. Apparently, that's going to be great, but everybody is complaining that it's getting worse, not
yeah,
better.
correct. So that's the big question, right? So I think it's not an intent problem or a signal problem. Signal, the word signal is, it's a signal, right? It's not a proof. It's a signal. So signal are like icing on the cake. But what really the cake is your data foundation. And then when we say data foundation is how you had built your go-to-market strategy, what segment you're going after, what kind of customer you want to go after. Even if you may be going after like, you people came up a short circuit that we can't boil the ocean, so let's just do ABM strategy. We're just going to focus on very focused 200 account, 2000 account. But even that, selection is very manual. It's very hunch based. That should change, I feel. It's high time that people should really leverage, and especially now, like agentic AI or AI capability, to do very smart lookalike pattern. There's always pattern. Like we have a customer, that, they have a very interesting, they have just 100 clients, but like they have some of these, all the 4 or 5 cohort of hotels and all the 4 or 5 cohort of restaurant, and then all the 4 or 5 banks, and in bank is such a broad area, they have a certain type of like credit union only. So these patterns are what you actually notice. And that's where like sales think differently.
David, tell me a little bit about we're taking a lot of this intent data, we're pulling the data into our systems. Now, this data, when it starts to get bigger and bigger, only gets a lot more data, right? It's almost as if it's a garbage truck filled with a ton of stuff. And how do you talked about time series? How do you then figure out, man, how do we get rid of some of this if this is no longer relevant? How does relevancy play into intent data?
Um, well, like Avi was saying, the nice thing now is we have AI models that are very good at going through data very quickly and finding patterns that humans could never see. I think the trick is to kind of make your data AI ready.
Yeah.
So it needs to be tagged properly. Like I was saying, and like you were mentioning, it needs to be kept in time series. And then it needs to be formatted correctly. It needs to have completeness. It needs to have standardization, sort of all of that stuff. And that's the foundation that we're building. That's why, we always say we make your AI, we make your AI, we make your data AI ready. Um, so that's kind of the magic sauce there, is once you get your ducks in a row, it's kind of like um, when you're cooking, if you have someone to like prep, like dice your carrots, uh, dice your meat, like prepare your sauces, and then you've
Julian,
got
your
a,
cabbage.
yeah. Yeah. And then another guy is doing, the sautéing, and then another guy is doing, the
Rice
plate
prep,
press. Yeah. So it's a supply chain. Um,
the
so
data
that's
supply
how I
chain
see
for
it.
marketing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then signal just come as like the kind of cream on top of this foundation. So the cake is not the intent signal. The cake is really this ICP foundation. Which account, which buyer, which type of account, which type of segment, the right tagging, the right definitions, the right territory management, like all of those kind of core architecture, right, in the back end. This is what like a lot of folks have started talking about in the last couple of months. Then you top it up with this creamy layer, which is the signal layer. You buy external signal, you create mousetraps of internal signal, you create these business triggers, you experiment. I mean, and let's not forget, there's no silver bullet, right? The whole go-to-market marketing is all about experiment. So we're ready to experiment. We'll see what stick, and then we
Yeah,
iterate.
it was like that one client we had where we went down this rabbit hole where initially they really wanted to understand our segmentation capabilities. So we're spending meetings after meetings showing the segmentation engine. And then finally we met this executive where she said, listen, segmentation is the icing on the cake. But like if you don't have the cake to slice up, then there's nothing
What's the point of
there,
the icing?
right? Yeah.
just eat the icing, get all figured out with you guys.
Yeah.
The
So
one last question that I'm hearing from a lot of people, Abhi, which is there are a lot of new vendors coming up in the intent space. Some of them are working on top of CDPs. Some of them are just everybody seems to be working with the same set of underlying providers. They all take the same data. There are five or six vendors on the top that are a simple thin layer on top of that. They're all buying data from the same three, four, five companies. How do people now see and find a way to differentiate? What differentiates one intent data vendor from another vendor, or what differentiates the ability for you to build the ICP and leverage the data versus another?
Yeah, I I strongly feel that all these publisher-based, intent feed providers is just a cog in the wheel. And one should leverage one or two of them. You can't rely on one of them. The whole waterfall enrichment is now catching up. I mean, this is what iCustomer is doing, right? you know, we're like, you don't rely on just one intent provider, it's a waterfall depending on how much specific you want to go. So let's try it out and see what's best for your business. And you give weighted system, which signal, which intent, the AI lookalike aspect, the business trigger, some custom signal you seek, whatever those factors are for your prioritization, for your ranking at any given point in time. So you have this dynamic list. So every Monday, your reps or AEs or BDRs know like which of these are the 100 accounts we got to focus in this week, or 50, or just 20 of those. 100 is a big number. So that's where I feel maybe a good thing. Otherwise, there's a lot of crap in the market right now.
David, I think the number of vendors that we are seeing is ridiculous, but I think the intent data coming in from a lot of different companies is also fairly complicated. If I had to do a simple version of intent data, David, where would I start? What are the five things that I should start with in terms of intent data? And what are the nice to haves?
um I mean, you do need some feed from this publisher circle, right? I think Bombora makes it pretty
Yeah,
simple to either subscribe to their service or use it as a recipe within your product. Um, then from there, you got to make sure that the intent is matching correctly to the proper account. So like let's just say for absurdity that like intent's 100%, it's bulletproof. Um, if if there's like trending intent for, I don't know, CDPs at,
Cisco
Axiom,
systems.
yeah, ACDC systems, whatever, that ACDC is going to buy it 100%, right? But, somebody like a Fidelity, they've got hundreds of subsidiaries. They have tons of offices. So you've got to make sure that intent is matching to the right account.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
The
think that's
complexity of
one.
matching it to the right place is difficult as well.
Yeah. So I'm not going to name them explicitly, but in some of the clients that I did GTM engineering for, uh, this platform they were using for intent had this like massive universe of accounts. And then to match that universe accounts to their accounts was very difficult. So they never really knew which account, even within sort of a named account list, they could match it to. So you've got to get that down. Um, and then, yeah, your ICP needs to be refined, uh, very clear in terms of firmographics, technographics. Um, and then there's also sort of historical look back, like build a story, right? You think about someone that buys a CDP. There is a long journey before they went to buy a CDP, right? Like they accumulated a bunch of systems. So that in of itself is like a historical look back. You need time series for that. Then they started hiring, maybe they hired like a new CDO, right? And then you see an announcement in their company announcements. Oh, we have this new digital first momentum that we're going to implement within the next 2 years. Then maybe there's M&A. The M&A might be a big trigger because now you have to incorporate systems from a whole nother company. So there's this whole story that goes behind a purchase like that. And I think that's really fundamental
Yeah.
to understanding your ICP is knowing that story, your buyer's journey.
Final thoughts, Abhi?
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, and sorry guys, I had intent. I also have a signal problem right now with internet signal. Um, one, one final thing I want to overemphasize that this is a completely two different approach, which people are like preaching, and I don't know why. One is follow the intent signal and then find the deal. A whole different path. I think it's a broken path. This has been around for a long time. This shouldn't exist. There's a second path, which is follow your ICP and then monitor the signal, then monitor the intent for those target accounts only. Okay. You can always expand that target list account. You can do better lookalike of that instead of the other way around. I think these are two very fundamentally two different approach, which there's a little bit of confusion and people are like kind of overlooking this aspect. So I personally strongly feel that the latter is where the current thing is because there's so much you can leverage agentic AI for. Just imagine if I know that in my hot seat accounts, whether my existing or prospect, I have so much rich data now. Like people are talking in communities. There's so much happening in like all kinds of like community platform. There's so much happening on LinkedIn. There's so much in the feed, which I can utilize, which nobody is talking about from an intern per se, you know? And these are some of the things, but these are only possible if I know the people I have to monitor or not in a bad way, like monitor, like accounts I have to monitor. Let's put it this way. And within those accounts, I have, relevant persona to monitor and what their pains are. What are they talking? Are they talking about all the bad reviews in G2 about a certain brand? Or are they talking about on LinkedIn? Are they asking questions? Or are they like confused about that? Because, the nuances are changing. We were in that conference, we were talking about a CIO of this big, massive company, and he was like, when our business asks certain thing, it takes us a while to really understand because the nuances are so different now. There are a whole bunch of like these modern CMOs and data-driven people, a lot of business hours, and all the tech guys can't kind of do correlation what they're asking. So if you're focused on keyword matching, well, good luck. So that's out of the door anyways. So I mean, this is a new era. Like this is less about basic rule matching, keyword matching to a more kind of a well thought out quantitative approach of like, you know, let's build the Zynga, one by one, piece by piece together. You know, that's the castle
Awesome.
we're
Thank you, Abhi. Thank you, David. Talk to you guys next week. This was fun.